ladies and gentlemen, we'll get started this morning. This is EOS Town Hall. We've all gathered here today to talk about the user agreement. Last week, we decided to kind of make a singular focus concept behind what it is that we're going to try to do every week. One of the first things that we wanted to do is talk about something we could all get moving on. We could come to a signal on and then circulate the idea and concept behind. So Kevin Rose has joined us again today. And Kevin, if you would, for everybody here, let everybody know what the user agreement is, and then we can talk about a plan on moving forward with the concept. Kevin.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me. I just want to preface this something I said at the beginning of the call, that if there's a lot of background noise, I apologize. Daycare is closed today, so my daughter and I are hanging out. Again, thank you everyone who's interested in this proposal. The purpose of the EOS User Agreement is to give a hard reset to expectations of what governance is on EOS. I think that many would agree with the idea that a lot of the proclaimed failures of EOS governance are merely a result of mismanaged expectations and not actually a of actually is. Basically, governance as I see it personally, and I am no expert by any means, but it is simply a mechanism to achieve a collective decision, whatever that decision is. And by that definition, I would say that all blockchains are governed blockchains. You may have heard the claim that EOS is the governed blockchain. I would say EOS is a better governed blockchain because unlike systems like proof of work, for example, the stakeholder of EOS and the block producer, the network validator, they are directly, you can draw a line of accountability between them. But in a proof of work system, you cannot do that. The stakeholder cannot hold the network validator directly accountable, and vice versa. And we all know that the way that that happens on EOS is through the token holder electing block producers. So just by that simple definition, governance has been working great on EOS in that block producers produce blocks. The network is developing at a breakneck speed. And that's kind of the level that we want to set in what EOS governance is. And this is probably how we should have started, which is very, very simple. What was unfortunate about the way that we launched originally was that there was a misunderstanding between the architects of the original governance proposed framework and their grasp on the basic feature set of EOS IO software, and that is the very robust permissions system. So for anyone that doesn't know, you can create a private key that can basically do a specific thing. And you can have these keys nested under one another where they have different levels of authority. And this very simple mechanism can actually create very robust governance. Just to give an example with ECAF, if they actually had a permission that had been created for them to be able to enforce their findings, we may be having a very different conversation today. But they persisted in this state of reliance on the network validators in order to enforce their proclaimed authority, and it didn't work. So that is what this EOS User Agreement focuses on. It uses language to describe the core feature set, specifically permissions and authorizations on EOS, and essentially establish an expectation of there is no blanket dispute resolution mechanism on EOS right now. That is just a fact. There is no base layer arbitration. There never was, because there are no permissions that any ECAF-like entity ever had that can do anything. ECAF has no more power than a normal token holder in that respect. So I want to sort of open it up to everybody after that introduction and maybe hear what people have to say about the EOS User Agreement, what they've read, what they think in general about the best way of proposing it, or if you have ideas of why it could be better. Obviously, the current proposal that's on chain can't be changed because it's on chain, but if it isn't successful, we can always change it in the future. So I just wanted to open it up to everybody. And again, thank you everyone for coming. Happy to talk to you all about it today.
So, we're going to post the link in the description of this video. And for those who are following along, it is at eosauthority.com. It's in their details. And the poll is titled, "Should EOS adopt the EOS User Agreement, EUA, in place of the interim constitution?" Preamble reads, the EOS User Agreement is a template primarily authored by top 21 block producer EOS New York. The EAU was written to replace the interim constitution. The interim constitution is in many places vague, largely unenforceable, and has been a source of conflict within the community. The EOS User Agreement is being proposed in order to establish a governing document that is manageable, reasonable, and enforceable, and that serves as a reflection of the way the EOS mainnet currently functions at a protocol level. The result, if enacted, the EOS User Agreement will act as the foundational document of the EOS blockchain and will establish expectations of the EOS governance amongst its user types. The EUA will serve as a written reflection of the method of governance that the EOS mainnet already employs, delegated proof of stake. The interim constitution will be removed as a governing document in its entirety. Now, this is one of 3 proposals that is up right now, and ultimately a core banned the existence, I think, right now, the Constitution. I'd love to get some comments and commentary by the beautiful women that are with us here this morning, the Cyber Code twins, who hopefully have some opinions about where we should head in the direction of the Constitution or the User Agreement. America.
People are always wondering, like, I think it's something that they should already put on their main site. Like, you always have like the BP.json. I think that having an actual governing document that's on chain on their site will help people understand the direction of the chain. Like, they need to see more visibility from the block producers on their stance on this.
On which they're choosing to go forward with.
Yeah.
What would happen then if if you're going to have this mutiny of there are 3 different documents right now that people are proposing? What happens if we get a certain number of the BPs following one constitution?
How does a debate on chain look like? That's
right.
Sure, like referendum, but like how do you? It's like referendum to me is just like the unpaid version of Lumios. It's like, where is that middle where like you can get more people to participate, but at the same time you're trying to have that unchained consensus of all the block producers. So I think that's where, I don't know if it's going to look like a tour or such, but moving in that direction, like, hey, let's start seeing some momentum, some domino effect of block producers
that's
putting up their
really kind of the idea though, but this really is a key document. I mean, it's something that we have to, I think, as a community, agree upon one document, right? We can't sit with this broken constitution or broken user agreement spread across different things, because everyone joining this network ideally is signing some similar document along the way, some similar point of governance, right? The agreements and what we're supposed to be able to do. It really gets in to some of the on-chain availability, some of the ways we're supposed to act, some of the permissions that we're supposed to adhere to. But we haven't been able to move forward with any of the new proposals. We knew when the initial constitution kind of came in line, as you both may remember, it was really just thrown in at the last minute. And we haven't been able to kind of get some ideas behind where we're going to move forward. ECAF has largely been a failure because it's a mutiny and no one is paying attention. But getting anything proposed and anything done has been difficult, because reaching that 15% consensus in referendum has been pretty hard. We can't get anyone to really vote on almost anything. And Kevin, right now, what is
it's like the government shutdown.
Right. what's the percentage of people who have voted now on the referendum?
That I don't know. I know how many have voted on the highest, the most popular referendum is like 22 million, and then the EOS User Agreement has about 13, maybe.
Yeah, 12.5 right now, 12.6, and it's at 99.6% approval right now. There's one person, there's one account who voted against.
Who was that?
Who was that?
Call them out. Call them out.
I have a question for the Cybercode twins, because both of you are developers, right? So looking at this document versus the current interim constitution, so looking at it from a developer's lens, do you see one being easier to understand or one that's more favorable to developers? I don't want to use the word favorable, but
You know what? Like, the only thing I'm really interested is, like, is this something I can put in an SDK? I was really interested to hear more input if we were to have Amy Wan. You know, like, she has like this SageWise company, and she's very familiar with like developers on, like, you know, putting in the arbitration, putting out the legality. To me, that would be more helpful as a developer framework. Sure, a government document is nice, but I would be more interested in an SDK framework to just put it on and not leave it only to the block producers, but you can also get the developers to participate as well.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
those
my
are
opinion.
two things, actually. The one thing I want to stress is that if the EOS user agreement was not passed and we had literally nothing, it would be exactly the same. There are things that I want to build on the EOS user agreement in the future that would be new features, so to speak, between the relationships of block producers and developers specifically. But as it currently stands, there'd be literally no difference between having absolutely nothing and the EOS user agreement. It is only about managing expectations. And specifically to your comment on the SDK of having any kind of, I think you're talking about dispute resolution as something that can be available to developers. That certainly can be created. I mean, I've seen people create escrow accounts where you'd be able to create a third permission that you give to an adjudicator where they'd be able to step in if there was a problem, you know?
and I think that that's the idea with the EUA is it really sets the baseline. It's so basic when you read it. It really, a big part of what this is highlighting the permission set, showcasing what is possible on chain right now, and then going and building from that. So if you wanted to build an SDK on top of that, and you wanted to add something specific, it would permit you to do that because it's really, really, really basic. It doesn't, the good thing about the EUA, in my opinion, is it doesn't tell you what should be or what can be. It just tells you what is, what currently is. That's it. And it's up to people to then take that and make it into something, which would then be either in a DApp or it'd be at another level, which is, I think, part of the genius behind this. Is it's so basic. It's really just foundational, what currently is, and not necessarily what we strive to be, which was one of the faults with the interim constitution.
Yeah, it's definitely more concise on, again, like managing the expectations for people that are newly entering the space and they see such an agreement. It does help the direction. So I do agree with you on those points.
And one of the purposes of us trying to get behind one particular document is to be able to make a move. I mean, most of us as block producers feel that hands are pretty much tied. Paralysis. And we have to be able to break through. So the concept that we could get signaling based around and try to get enough people to that are top 21 block producers to signal that they would sign the user agreement. It being that it's not going to be a major change. It is going to be just a change in the method that we use to enact what is proposed. The fact that we have had a 96% approval thus far, only on the 1.2%, the 12 million votes that are voting. But ideally, we can try to figure out how to get some more hoopla around pushing this out. And so we can get a change done. We can look at then some of the things that might be, harder in the future, but at least that we have some sort of method to, how do we push something forward right now when we're not going to get 15% on a referendum?
I have an idea about that.
How do we? It's simple. You just do an MSIG. That's all it is at the end of the day. Even if it were to pass the referendum, it would still need an MSIG.
Yeah, but you got to get them comfortable with it. You got to get everyone's got to feel comfortable, right? And I just texted Ryan Betham because I want him to join. He had he had this idea. Sorry, what'd you say?
I said that's the power of governance right there.
It is.
Just everybody getting together.
Well, ideally pushing moves forward and doing things, and ideally getting the community behind as much as we can. But you're right. You know, the MSIG is what's important. The MSIG right now, in our governing bodies, the block producers have the ability to enact changes, and then voters can reflect ultimately, because the one thing they are kind of voting on, most people are voting on, is the power of who's running the network, the BPs.
Exactly.
Right. So
when you start doing this and they don't like it, they'll just put you out.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we need to write. I think we need to write a guide for block producers. And I'm serious about this. It's a little condescending, but I am serious. I think that a guide should be written to block producers for how to interpret the will of the community, and it's used how to effectively use the referendum system, how to use EOS Titan's tools that can literally show you how many of your voters voted for a specific referendum and which way they voted. That's so powerful. Putting this stuff together and not putting it out there for, you know, the general audience, but saying, hey, block producers, this is yours. This is for you. Wake up. You have to be paying attention to this stuff.
Sounds like a block producer manifesto is more or less needed there, Kevin.
I don't think it needs to be as like romantic as that, right? But or romanticized is what I mean. But I just think it's like, hey, these are 3 useful tools. There's referendum, there's these tools with Titan, and then there is a timeline. Like just because we aren't gonna do the 15% for 120 days doesn't mean that everybody still doesn't want to hit a certain threshold. Like, I don't feel comfortable proposing the EOS User Agreement at only 13 million votes. I don't even know if everyone I know that we just translated it into Korean. That's great. I know Yves is going to China and he's going to talk to a lot of people, but I don't think it's in Chinese
leaving
yet.
tomorrow.
Finished it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's part of the idea as well, that we seem to be like, it's not that we're forgetting. I'm not sure that the word forgetting is the proper term, but I try to look back at when we were doing the launch calls, and we were getting on a call every 12 hours. We were having the go, no go vote every 24 hours. And we were doing most of the conversation back and forth in English, and then we would pause, do in Chinese. If I put myself in the Chinese shoes, all I hear is blah, 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 blah for about 10 minutes. Then I hear Chinese for 30 seconds. Then I hear blah, 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 blah for 10 minutes. And it's the same thing with these governance, even just this call. We're having these discussions right now. So I think a big part, and everything's in English, and most of the Telegram chats are in English. So one of the things that I think is super important, on top of what Kevin is saying with the Titan tools, which are great because it allows you to see the will of voters on chain, specifically your voters, which is just amazing. Shout out to Titan for that. One of the things that I'm doing, and what's on the agenda, I'm leaving tomorrow for China for 2 weeks, is talking about the referendum and how we can get other, Chinese involved. And sure, I use EOS Authority's website and it's translated into Chinese, but it's still not the same as having the tools built in China for Chinese that are mirrored from what's being created in English. And there's always a delay, there's always a lag. So how do we get, if we go back to the MSIGs, why does it take time for people to sign those MSIGs? Because we assume that they're caught up with everything that we're doing at every moment. But the reality is, once we put it on chain, they then go back, start reading from scratch. They weren't part of the development of a lot of these things. So how do we involve the other side of the world in the development of these things, I think is a big key component of how we're going to get stuff passed. Even if we look at the referendum tool itself, or the referendum process itself, we were a key part of that. I don't think there was anybody in the referendum core that was representing like Chinese community. Maybe Canon was in there, I'm not sure. Josh maybe would be able to chime in. But in general, like we're progressing on this governance side of things, and we're really dropping half of the community. So we need to really get better at that if the premise is that we want for things to move more efficiently and get accepted. I think we need to get them involved from the very beginning and not kind of just after we're done. And then just seeking the approval at the very end. And I think that's why BOSS was formed. A big part of why BOSS was created was because of that. A lot of these technical ideas that were being brought up by certain super strong technical developers from China were just getting dropped because it was one message at a time in the mainnet BP group. And they get dropped, whatever, by the time they get to translate, by the time we do all a bunch of back and forth, they need to figure out, okay, what just happened? They just said, fuck it. They just started their own thing. So I really want to make sure that that does not happen with this type of thing as well.
I totally agree. We need to get more involvement just in general in these conversations if we're going to have them with people from that community. I was reaching out to Bo from EOS Silicon Valley. I think he was a good, at least for me, an in-between. I'm not sure if you guys would propose anyone else that we could start communicating with and make sure that they're on these calls and making sure that they are feeling included. Because yeah, just like it's an East meets West problem, and not that anyone is trying to go forward and move forward in just a singular direction. I unfortunately don't speak Chinese. So I can't do that myself. I'd love, to hear who you guys think might be some other people that we can start getting involved in this conversation, because we need to hear their voice and need to find out, hopefully that they can bring the concept and bring the conversation to that side of the world, before we do.
I don't think this happens on purpose. I really don't think this is purposeful. I think this is a continual challenge that we'll continue to face, and it's always going to be difficult. We're always going to have that in the front set of our minds to think, all right, what do we do to make sure that this happens this time? Key people that have sway, or that. So the other thing that we need to keep in mind is a lot of the people that are in our channels that represent the Chinese BPs are the community managers. All respect to community managers, but they have no decisional power. And so they're the only person in the team who can speak English. They take the information, they summarize it, and then give them to the key decision makers. So there are very few people that are decision makers and can speak English fluently. The people that can do that are super key.
Before we go down this road any further, I have spoken to the decision makers at other block producers in China. This is because the process of creating this proposal has taken months. A lot of the ideas, I would just pick up WeChat and talk to people in China and ask their opinion. So I've spoken. They're not totally unaware that this exists. But I didn't include it in Chinese on the proposal. That was a screw up, and I take responsibility for that. What I think, and this kind of goes against what you just said, Yves, and I don't like it. And also, by the way, I do like it. It's Ryan Betham's idea. I don't want to act like I came up with it, but it is set a date, saying in 30 days. The EOS User Agreement is going to be proposed. So that says two things. One, block producers, please check it out. And two, token holders, if you don't want it, just vote on the referendum. Just say no. We're not gonna do it if nobody wants it. We would like to keep our job. So I think that's the first thing to start. Well, obviously, getting it in a complete form in other languages is part of that. But once it's available, it's like start the clock. And then after 30 days, we do it. Period.
I think one of the advantages right now with the way it's presented, Kevin, in my opinion, with the EUA, is that it's super easy to understand even for the tech developers. There's no extra wording, there's no extra blah blah. It's really, really basic. And so once it's translated and once people see it, there's very little to understand. It's not like you need to go deep in it and ponder all the potential ramifications of, sure there are some, but from a technical point of view, you can understand it. So I think that will in itself give a lot of traction right away from a lot of the technical people that will be able to understand this document and see that it's not a bunch of mumbo jumbo.
But to everyone's point here, it does need to be translated, and you're right. Can't be perfect all the time, Kevin. But getting this translated into a language, especially Chinese, would make sense before we can really start making that push. And we're probably lucky we didn't have a timer on this without that, from the go. So one thing that I think that we could do, or really move forward to doing, is getting that translation done and putting that back onto this proposal as soon as possible. Who have you found, Kevin, that you would feel comfortable with that might be able to translate that to where that can be a next point of action? And then we can point to that and start to get some community feedback from those Chinese VPs. Is there anyone that you're comfortable with that might be able to do translation for the document?
Yeah, our full-time Chinese community manager is working on it. EOSIS was very kind and volunteered to translate it into Korean. They did, and there are not a number, but there are a couple preceding documents to this. Like, yes, it's very simple to understand, Yves, but it's not to be judged in a vacuum. I don't think any of that's kind of how we got in this mess in the first place. Is people wrote things in a vacuum, because it's also understanding like the contra arguments to what currently exists, which gives credibility and legitimacy to the current proposal. So understanding the importance of permissions to enforce governance structures, understanding the flaws in 15% referendum. Those things have been translated into Chinese, and we have distributed them. They've been reposted to a number of popular blogs. Other block producers in China have also latched onto the idea and shared it with their communities. I think it's just going to be slow. I don't see the current state of things as the same old paralysis of indecision. I think we are moving toward it, evidenced by the people on this call, the people that are listening to this right now on YouTube. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish. We're going to have it finished translated by the end of the week. I want to touch base with Ryan Betham because it was his idea to set a date for this stuff. He wanted to do other things with it as well. This was the EOS User Agreement vote was just a facet of that. And then one thing I wanted to bring up with this call as well is that there have been a number of people who have banded together to develop the EOS Community Constitution, which I find the name incredibly offensive. I consider myself part of this community, and that's ridiculous to call it that. You should call it something else. But they've written it, and it's basically, it's just a lateral movement to a more verbose version of the current Constitution that completely ignores the exact same problems that we have iterated on in this call and over the past 8 months. It's very discouraging to see a group of people that are very smart, whom I respect, to spend this much time working on something that I truly believe will ultimately fail, but it's something that has to be discussed in the community, and that's going to probably delay things as well. Another delay is going to be Block 1 continuing to say, we're going to do this, and we have to sit on our hands until they do it. So there's the EOSIO best practices for governance that Brendan Bloomer has said that they're doing. It's supposed to be released last week. I'll continue to hold my breath. I think Block 1 does an amazing job. I don't really appreciate it when they announce things like this and then all the token holders wait for it, and we're just stuck here, They kind of
waiting before they vote on the referendum. I feel like that is holding up decisions.
What, if you can readdress, what was your first topic of discussion in this? What's this? What is the community constitution that you're talking about here, Kevin? I'm unfamiliar with that.
Yeah, it was just.
I'll post a link for you.
Released a couple of days ago, written by members of the Korean token holder community. It may include Korean block producers. I do not know. Okay. I know that it includes EOS Amsterdam, and is also the result of months of work. Not to discredit the amount of effort that went into it. And for that reason alone, it should be at least read and understood and considered. But I've read and understood it and considered it, and I'll continue to do that. I have huge problems with it, and we're all gonna have to battle it out at some point. It's the way it's got to go.
So
It's got to get decided on chain.
Battle of the constitutions, right? So that's ultimately what we're looking at. In signaling on the EOS Authority tool, one of the things that I think is fantastic is that you can go through, and actually EOS Amsterdam was the only one to actually to vote no on the user agreement referendum, which would make sense because they've been working on that one as their own. But ultimately, we do get some signaling just on the EOS Authority, the referendum site for the user agreement here. And if we look at the number of block producers who have voted, we have not yet. But ultimately, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that are listed in here, and some of those being top 21. But ultimately, in this type of signal and whatever date it is, if we move it towards, this is the type of thing where I think that if you saw 15 of 21 of the top block producers and the end of a time, that you should see or could see those block producers move towards the MSIG to sign something into agreement. And that's really what we're talking about here.
To me, another signal could be like, top 15 proxies, like how they are.
Absolutely, but unfortunately, they don't have the power to sign the MSIG.
Yeah.
So you can't get them can't get anyone to move there. Whereas with this, the hope and the goal is that we can spread awareness, get people to sign this signaling which way that they want to go. Ideally, get more people involved. We have to reach out to more block producers that are on this list. Really, it's almost everyone who proposes a referendums. That's their duty, is to get people around creating the action. And the first action really is going to block producers and saying, will you please signal yes or no on this document? And that push is what we really need from the people who are creating these documents, or else we're not going to ever get to that point. And yes, we want voter participation, and we want to understand proxy participation for understanding which direction you as a block producer should be taking. But we really, when you create a referendum, your job then becomes to spread that understanding of that policy and get people to set forth what their intentions are. And then once you have the intentions of a majority of the block producers, either there is a time that cuts, and then the block producers recognize this was the scheduled understanding of how I'm supposed to move on an action, or if it's just a majority that we reach, if it's 15, 16, 17, 18 block producers out of the top 21 that you get to, that ideally there's a date in which everyone goes through and signs that contract.
So are we deciding on like Pi Day or pushing the agreement?
Well, the idea was going to be hopefully to do things probably on a 30-day basis, or really when you propose a referendum, put a time date lock in there. And really, it's kind of within that time that you have to go out and communicate with the other VPs and say, listen, this is something that I feel, as either a voter or as a proxy owner or as a block producer, that should be enacted. Can you signal either way? And trying to raise that awareness is, really how we need to learn how to take the next steps in direction. Because again, we aren't getting much done. But this tool, as it's set up, is a great tool, and then obviously should be giving us the power to make choices. But getting people to all act on this is what we're talking about. How do we get them to actually move forward with things? So getting campaign, and that's what campaign. That's kind of bringing everybody together as part of this campaign trail. That's something that we will, as block producers, sign this user agreement. We will move forward. And Kadar, why don't you speak on that?
Which portion?
Us signing the user agreement. Where do you feel we are in this? It's
We've signed it, I believe.
we're not on chain here.
Yeah, I can send a transaction link out here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send it in through to the town hall group. Yeah, we signed it. I just signed it like an hour ago.
Beautiful. So that we now have, let's try to filter this out to just the block producers, and this is what I'm sharing online here. Well,
Josh, you've been quiet. What do you think? All right, what does EOS Canada think?
Sorry, I've been quiet because there's been a lot of talk behind me. I don't know if you'll be able to hear me at times. For us, the big thing is just seeing what the community wants. We believe our role is more be a block producer, then take whatever the community signals and then enact that, rather than we don't want to be pre-signaling our intent, because then we're pushing either our agenda on certain things or our ideas. We just want to take what the community tells us. And if there's any questions, to kind of field those rather than put it on chain. Yes, we are signing this because we will flop to whichever way our voters tell us to go.
So Josh, this brings up the problem. This is the chicken and the egg problem, because we're not necessarily getting enough signal from the community in voting. That was in the referendum system right now. Whereas we tried to abide, or we were thinking about, we were hoping that we would have some signals that would reach the 15% required to really kind of make that signal. We're not getting anywhere close to there, right? So even any of the top referendum ideas aren't getting anywhere close to what we need as far as that actual signal goes. So, the top 30 in the top polls right now, the top referendum has 2.23%. The EOS RAM-free Rex issue. That's not, and it's signaled by 99.2% approval. But
I'd like to point out that that's 2% of total tokens. Not wait, or is it? Yeah, I forget. But it's basically, that is 20. No, never mind. Forget I said anything.
It's 23 million votes, 2.2% participation. Going at this rate, we will have nothing done. That's the problem we're trying to solve here, Josh. In the conversation last week, the idea behind the block producer signaling is that the block producers are ones that can take action. And if you do ultimately make a choice on something, understanding and trying to understand where your constituents or their constituents want you to vote is an important thing. And moving and making sure we actually create changes in the chain is our job. Like trying to get to a point where we can do our job. What are some of your thoughts there? If we wait for the true signals from the community, we might be waiting, a long time.
I always felt you can always change after.
You can.
Yeah. So.
And like, what's a true signal, right? What does true signal mean?
It's going to be different for everybody. That's the point.
Yeah.
I totally agree. For me, seeing something like Rex with 98%, of the votes that are participating, 98% participation, saying yes would mean to me that that's something as a producer that I could start to feel comfortable with, saying yes, this is something I would sign in for. I would be okay with moving forward on that. I think that some of the things, especially as you were creating them as especially if you proposed the referendum, whatever it is, in this case, when we're just talking about the user agreement, just trying to reach out to 21 block producers to get their feelings on how they believe that their constituents want them to vote, it's probably easier than trying to reach 15% participation.
The way I look at it is like, hey, we're going to signal something right now. If block one releases anything in the next 30 days, I'll have a look at it again. But, I just think we should take the baby steps already.
I agree. And Josh, I'd love to hear your feedback there. I mean, I know you guys want to be moving with your constituents, but we all want to get some stuff done.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, that mindset. And just using the phrase baby steps, as just said, I mean, we are 6 weeks into referendum only. So to me, we're at the beginning of something that I think we might be jumping the gun saying, hey, this should be going on. Nothing's happening. But again, we are 6 weeks into something. This is a brand new experiment. I'm sure there's a lot of token holders in Wales that don't even know it's out there yet because maybe they check in quarterly or bi-monthly or whatever it may be. So there's that baby step as well.
I'd like to agree with you and just reiterate what I said at the beginning of the call about, you know, my personal threshold certainly hasn't been met with only 13 million tokens with not much publications and not many publications in different languages. It is only 6 weeks, and that's why I said I think that we are not in a state of paralysis anymore. We are moving toward progress, and everyone should, so long as we're all willing to evaluate new information as it comes in, I think this process is going to be great. So if Block 1 does drop something the day before we're scheduled to vote, if there is a schedule to vote, we should probably, delay it, because obviously we got to take that into account. That's how I think this is going to go. But I think it
could be pressure or it could be taken into account. So it goes both ways.
Again, sorry, I didn't hear you.
Good.
So I'm saying, like, the community involvement, it can be taken as pressure, it can be seen as direction. So if it helps Block 1 speed up documents or not, maybe it could be seen as a good thing.
Yeah, so you guys, this is Miles here. I think it's also important to remember that, like, the referendum itself is the signal. I think we can all agree that it's unlikely that we're going to hit 15% on any of these votes. So the thing that block producers should be deciding very carefully is not, whether they should vote in the referendum, but when it comes to it, how they should vote in an MSIG proposal to actually enact one of these things. Right now, what the referendum is serving as is just a signal to try and gauge community sentiment to ultimately help those block producers make the decision. But the real way, at least right now, that actual decisions are going to be made is through that MSIG.
And I agree with that. It's getting and pushing the block producers to certain decisions that's always the problem right now. Does it say
right here in this document, like MSIG?
It does not say that. I think that the concept of how these referendum proposals, when they're pushed forward, should be, how they should be decided upon, should be kind of listed in there. There should be more or less, and that was the conversation that we had last week, some rules around, as I'm proposing a referendum, what my expectation in that referendum is. Is this something that needs to be decided upon within 30 days, and then maybe or not I will retract it if it doesn't have a strong enough signal, or 60 days. Some rules of engagement for the documents as they're pushing forward is some of the thought behind that. But
one of the things that I liked about the EOS User Agreement is that it removed this somewhat arbitrary 15% threshold from the interim constitution, and I think that's a good thing. But it does create a new challenge for all block producers, which is, how do you decide when something is a strong enough signal? If you have a proposal that hasn't reached 15%, but it's got, 10% of the votes, and it's a 99% vote in favor, is that a strong enough signal or not? And maybe Kevin can speak to this, because I'm sure he's thought about it a lot more than I have. But I think that's going to be the challenge going forward, which is how do block producers decide that they feel comfortable that they've had enough of a signal from the community that they can take action in an MSIG to enact a proposal?
There's not going to be an answer to that question, because if you think about how you would bring any of these referendum to a block producer, whether or not you're a BP, the proposer, a token holder, it doesn't matter who you are. You're going to ask, first of all, what do you think personally, right? Hold on, my daughter's about to hit her. Sorry.
Okay.
No, my daughter is about to hit her head. She's sitting underneath the entrance table, and she's about to stand up and smash her head.
But Kevin
anyway,
said
yes.
Yeah. You're going to ask two questions. You're going to say, what do you think about this personally? And they're going to walk around it. They're going to go, you know, I mean, we don't think it's bad, or, you know, that not really any commitment to any side of it. And that's fine, because, you know, you don't have to commit, because we have referendum, we have stakeholder voting, and ultimately that's who chooses who the block producers are. So you should be cautious. That's your job. But then it's going to say, you're going to ask them, well, how many tokens would it take for you to actually do this? They go, oh, well, I don't know. I guess I got to understand how many tokens that are voting for the referendum are voting for me. And you'd say, oh, great, we have a tool for that. You should check this out. You can see literally exactly how many of your votes you might lose, or if you don't vote for it. And then you can see how many votes you might win if you do vote for it. There's a tool for that. So I think it's those two fundamental questions. What do you think? And then how many tokens do you need to signal for you to do it? And it's going to be different for everybody.
At the same time, I'm trying to like considerate of the token holders' resources, because they are staking their tokens. To me, it feels like kind of a hostage, like the RAM. They might maybe be using it for other actions. I'm just trying to be considerate of people's resources.
Yeah, no,
time. So
I
like, 4
agree
months
with
is,
that. Right.
staking. I'm like, they might need that liquidity for something else.
Right.
I'm just looking at from different point of views. Like developers, like, yeah, maybe I can like stake this many tokens for the referendum, but I really need it for my project. So I'm just trying to be very considerate of the token holders.
I agree with that, and we're going to post the heat map link in the in this video description as well. But I'm going to get into that just a little bit here so everyone can see it. That's following mine.
There's two things there. It's the heat map, but what Kevin is talking about is also the link I just shared afterwards.
Okay.
Where you can straight up see who's voting for me, and are they voting for whatever proposal, and then does that match? So if you click on the second link I put, you can see that, for example, Rex for All, if you click on Rex for All, or that little arrow or whatever, yeah, it'll expand the bottom. So there's 16.1 million votes that are currently voting for me that agree with my decision, because they also voted for Rex for All. And there's only 21,000 votes that voted against Rex for All that are voting for me as a block producer. And then you can go super granular with all of that. So all the different block producers, and on the right-hand side of this page, you can see which referendum I did not vote for, and how my constituents effectively are or did not vote. It's extremely powerful. It's an amazing tool.
And Josh, have you seen that tool before? I mean, getting you involved in the conversation, not to pick or prod, but you know, in your stance on waiting to vote before we have true signals, you know, and I agree with you in the fact that this is early. Referendum is, you know, less than 2 months old, but you know, in this current situation, referendum as it is, any of the referendums, I would doubt, you know,
more than 7 months into change.
yeah, I just can't see this getting to the, you know, the 15% concept that we would all hope that it would be. I mean, we can all try our best to get out and do a rock the vote campaign, but moving people to voting, it comes with a couple of issues, and one of them being, where do I stake my resources? What's important to me? So, you know, really the voting class of users is radically different than the developer class of users or the user class of users. So the voting class of users, ultimately, the thought behind these things was, in a referendum, especially if it's a timed referendum, those that are going to vote, which is a smaller subclass of our users, may be signaling in a strong way which actions for us to take. What point can you get comfortable around if it's not going to be 15%? Because I don't think we'll ever get anything done if we remain at that level, at least not for the next 6 months. You know, there's no signal to me that in the last, if anything, it's more or less dying down because of inaction.
I feel like
Getting people
other
to-
chains will be released with more
They will.
stronger documents than we currently have, and it will show
The lack of movement forward, the lack of participation in this network. So it's really more a call to action on the block production side. If we're going to a growing chain and be able to grow into some of the ideas of the things that we want to get done, we need to take some hard action. Josh, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, I have seen this before. So yeah, great tool that Titan put out. I've been saying since before we even got referendum out that I didn't think 15% would ever be hit. I thought it was an unattainable goal. Even pre-launch, when there was a lot of governance discussions around, the one thing I kept bringing up was 15% being within the Constitution itself means that if we can't reach that goal, then we're kind of screwed because we can't change that goal without, you know, hitting that target itself. If it was outside the Constitution, you kind of have some more play and leeway that you can hit. So yeah, I definitely agree that 15% is unattainable. As for what becomes a strong enough signal, that's not a decision I get to make. I'm just an employee at EOS Canada, so it's not something that I don't know if it's been thought of or decided or talked about by the guys who make the decision here. So I couldn't really answer that, but I would imagine they'd want to see, you know, at least a few months of running to see what happens. I would imagine that they'd want to see if a whale comes out and votes on something, will that signal other whales to start voting? I would guess that with the amount of community members who are saying, oh, we're waiting on Block 1 to release this governance best practices guide, they'd probably want to see how the community reacts to that as well, because that'll probably change a lot of ideas. And we also see that the referendum voters versus BP voters, it's an order of magnitude of difference. So there's a lot of difference there. There's a lot of people who have been activated, at least to vote on law producers, who at the very least we can see that maybe they haven't been activated to vote on referendum. So I think just giving that time, that'd be my best guess. I don't know the actual answer to it. But yeah, I agree with you that if we have, you know, 6 or 8 months of stagnation, that's, you know, we're showing nothing but stagnation. I think 6 weeks or 7 weeks of stagnation isn't stagnation.
No, I think part of this after last week was that, you know, ideally in this community forum we can try to get traction, try to get momentum on one concept, and we in our discussions decided that this might be one that we can move forward on, and that's why we're here again this week talking about this. And so, you know, in that concept that 6 or 7 weeks might not be enough, maybe it's going to take longer than a couple weeks for us to continue just to pound this concept in and to get thoughts just around this, because in this agreement, we wouldn't be stricken to the 15% rule of referendum governance. So, you know, what I think, again, we should probably, you know, what I hope to do next week, as we continue to have discussions, continue to base the discussions around just this, gain awareness, try to get people out. And the goal from this can be, hopefully anyone who's watching this video can share this fact, share the thought that this referendum needs to be voted on. We need to try to get a clear signal. We need to get other participation from the other BPs internationally and get their thoughts and concepts on it. But let's stick to a singular concept, one thing that we can, you know, get something moving forward on. You're right, the BP document, the direction. When's the estimate? I mean, I know Black One's not great with when these things are coming out, if they're ever coming out behind it. But does anyone have an estimate on when that document is supposed to be released?
Yes.
Weeks ago.
Last week.
Yeah, it was supposed to be released last Monday.
The problem is that people are waiting on something that they have no control on, and it's like it was, as Kevin keeps saying around Telegram, it was very almost wrong of them to do that. They create an expectation and don't deliver, and then all these people are waiting on that thing.
So we're waiting on that as well. But in this, like,
I think just managing expectations, like, okay, we're also waiting on it, but our opinion will evolve once they release it.
Yeah.
But we'll let you know in 30 days if anything changes.
well, hopefully it won't take a full 30 days before we have the document.
I think it's going to take as long as Josh outlined, to be honest. There's just, it's a new system. There's a lot of moving parts. It's in a lot of languages. It's just not going to happen fast. The only thing that happens fast on EOS are block times.
Aha.
To the
With the
music.
zingers.
Okay.
And I agree with that. Hopefully what we can do is we can kind of get, again, we're trying to get community engagement. We're trying to get people involved. That's why the Cyber Code twins are here. That's why you guys are on this call. That's why I'm here. But we need to kind of push this into action. And so my call to action as we near the end of this discussion is to bring this back, bring again, all of us, if we can go through and have more communications based on this, letting people know through videos like this and through our Telegram chats, is we need to come to a decision. Maybe we as a community can come to a decision on this user agreement. Yes, we need to get Block One's direction forward in their documentation and understand their governance documentation. But hopefully by this time next week, we'll all have been sitting with that document for a couple days, and we can continue the discussion based on that document and where it's going to be moving us forward as a group. But between now and then, trying to get other BPs to either signal themselves on the referendum, and those of us that are on this call can hopefully discuss with other people. Josh, you can go talk to those that are in leadership as well with you at EOS Canada and say, hey, this is what we've been discussing. Maybe we can get stronger voices in the community to start having stronger opinions and try to move things actually forward. Each of us, Kevin, I know you're going to working on the Chinese translation for the document. Once you've done that Chinese translation, I implore you to reach out to some of the block producers there and let them, tell them about the idea of signaling towards something or not, and try to get them to signal one way or the other. And if we can get that understanding of how many producers have voted for the referendum, we can come back and we can have a decision or discussion on who else we might be able to talk to move that forward. Because if we sit here in 6 weeks from now, we still are only at 2 or 3% of voting, which is probably going to be the case, and we don't have people to go to say, hey, reach out to your constituents. If you feel it's something that you are interested in voting on, and the current constituents have voted that way, what is the next step for us to get all comfortable with pushing something forward? And it's the block producers that have really the responsibility to engage, not only push for what they would like or how they want to work on the network, but engage with their community to get them to come out.
I still think, managing again the expectations, like what happens if it doesn't hit 50%? These are the proceeding steps. Like he was saying before, some sort of guidance for VPs to say, okay, these are the matters of referendum. We are leading the examples of okay, it's been 7 months since it changed. We're trying to have some directions in the governance in general.
Yeah.
And this is how it's going to look like.
It
could always change later.
Right. Well, that's again, I think you're absolutely right. And if the next step here is to taking the thoughts of the concept of writing a guide for VPs and saying this is a good idea, putting together a guide that says we as a VP feel that it should be run this way, and maybe trying to get a couple of other VPs to kind of sign off on that general concept. Again, you're not forcing
you're just trying to manage expectations.
Right, right. So maybe as a takeaway from this, Stuart, we could start working on a document, an open proposal document, do a Google Doc, try to get some of the other people that are on this call to, after we create a small framework of what that looks like. I don't know, Kevin, have you actually, you had come up with that concept. Have you actually begun any work on that type of paper?
I want to give credit to who gave me the idea, a gentleman named Luca in Telegram. With Chain Rift.
Okay.
He had the idea to create this guide, and I hope he isn't upset that I have spoiled the surprise.
Celebrate with Luca.
Yeah. But I expanded on it a little bit by including some of the tools for EOS Titan and Yeah, the answer is no. I have not started it.
Does Luca have a base for this already? Do you know?
What do you mean?
Like in
Is it
this
just
guide,
is it Telegram discussions,
or is there a
Oh,
guide?
no, it's just something he mentioned to me.
Well,
okay.
so let's contact Luca from Chainrift and see if that's something that he could begin to author.
I think it has only a couple components. The first is creating a referendum specific voter permission, which, like I said in the beginning, I know this sounds condescending, but putting it out there anyway, in case anyone doesn't automatically do that. So creating a special referendum permission for the block producers so they're not using their active key, how to vote for referendum using CLEOS, how to make the decision for yourself whether or not a certain referendum has garnered enough support, making visible the tools that are available, where to look at referendum, how to use EOS Titans tools, and then done. That's what the document looks like, as far as I can tell.
Cool.
That sounds like a good plan. At least we can start something that might be effective when other people, if given this to other block producers, maybe they can have some direction on how they might want to move forward. Again, I fear the lack of action on the chain, lack of movement forward, being something that really could deter the community and really not allow us to grow into the chain that we want to be. We will get competition, obviously, from other chains. We have other chains that are coming out. But if we sit here with our hands tied, and it's always an excuse about why we haven't untied our hands, the larger blockchain community and the larger developer community might become frustrated enough to start looking for other answers. And I think our job really is to make this chain a vibrant chain, make this chain usable for all different types of people. But ultimately, this style of governance, this DPoS style of governance, looks for direction as much as it looks for just those votes. So on that, again, I think this is going to be a repeatable conversation until we kind of get some action here. And on what the point of these town hall meetings is to try to cause action. And at the end of this, if we can work with Luca and try to come up with a basic guide, and we will share that document so other people can contribute to that.
And share with EOS Go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So why don't America, you assist along with there? You've got such great ideas. You've got such great
volunteering.
A volunteer right there. It's volunteerists is what a lot of us
Yeah,
are.
how many of you are Acapulco or whatever?
And Acapulco.
I have family there, so it's
I'm sure it's sunny down there and people are having a lot of fun. But we need to get things like that done. So by next week on this call, we will have a base to what that guide looks like. So we'll start with that. And then by next week on this call, we'll continue to have this discussion on the user agreement and what it takes for us to get to a decision on the evolution of the Constitution. So by next week, hopefully everyone here, I think it's see something, say something, and bring a friend. Hopefully maybe next week we can reach out to some people from the Chinese community and make sure that they're involved, really make sure that they're in parts of these discussions as we continue to have them and try to make them public so people can understand, what's going on. And those that are out there listening, subscribe below, get involved in some of the Telegram chats that we all are on. We're trying to move this network forward, and we're trying to do that in a way that is reasonable and taken with the direction of those that are voting on chain. To help us with those decisions, get out and vote on chain. We know you have other things to do with your tokens, and staking them for votes isn't always the first thing that you might want to do with the network, but we really need to be able to make some decisions here. And the way that it is right now, we need stronger signals from the community on voting. So rock the vote. This is EOS. If we're going to do anything important and special, we're all going to need to participate Thank you all for coming today. Thank you all for joining us. And we'll be back here same time next week. We do these calls at 7 a.m. Pacific in California. We do that in order to try to reach a better time internationally. So if you as a BP or you as a proxy want to come in and join some of these discussions, EOS Town Hall on Telegram is the channel to reach us at. Appreciate everyone's time. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody.
Cheers. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.